Hello everybody, how's it going? It's me, Krendor, and today I want to react to a video that I have some counterpoints to. I kind of want to play devil's advocate a bit because my friend from my gaming group sent me this video, and he sent a bunch of us this video, and he's like, what do you guys think of this? And I was like, I don't really agree with this, and then I watched it again, and I was like, actually, I really don't agree with this, to the point where I kind of want to just make a react video to this. I want to be an average Twitch streamer, YouTuber at this point. And just react to stuff. But I genuinely want to react to this because I'm somebody who has played so much Warhammer. I have a ton of Warhammer. I've played a ton of Warhammer. I've played Age of Sigmar 2nd edition, 3rd edition. I've played 4th edition at this point. I've played Kill Team. I've played Warcry. I've played 40k. I've played Underworld. I've played Blood Bowl for as long as I can remember. I've played a lot of games. All right? And I have some opinion. I mean, I've played D&D, right? And a lot of this video is going to talk more about like narrative play in D&D. So I kind of want, let's just jump right into it so I can start reacting. All right, here we go. It is called The Board Gamification of Wargames by Ben DeHart. All right, this got 89,000 views from a month ago. A lot of comments, a lot of feedback. So I just want to give mine because let's just go.
Every time I've talked to people about their preferred way to play war games, their answer is the same. Narrative style play is their favorite. And every time...
Pause. Narrative style play is not my favorite. Right off the bat, narrative style play is not my favorite. I am not a big narrative person. I think narrative stuff is cool. I think having a unit feel thematically accurate is cool. So if I'm playing a Slan, I'd like him to feel like a Slan, but that's all I need. I don't need my Slan to have a backstory. I don't need him to be in like his own Dungeons and Dragons style universe to play a game. Like, I just want him to be a Slan. Like, I'm playing Total War, and he's thrown onto the battlefield. I'm like, that's a Slan. He casts magic. Cool. That's all I need. I don't need a big, like, narrative backstory, all right? So right away, I'm like, that's not me.
Time I see people ask for advice about how to get into a war game, the advice from the community is the same. Go with the faction you think is the coolest. Don't worry about the meta. Be okay with losing games. No.
Yes. That's actually advice I've given on this channel. So that is, yes, correct.
Numbers change, the models won't. Now this is all good advice. Great advice even. But if this is the prevailing wisdom of wargaming from wargamers, why isn't this the way we play?
It is the way I play. That's the way I play. I don't care if something's good or bad. Unless it's like god awful, like, I don't know, Cruel Boys last edition. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to play the most meta army every game. I'm going to have fun. So, I don't know. I think that's true. That's the way I play. I guess it depends on who you're playing against a lot of the times as well. That might play into it.
All the support and attention in the wargaming hobby seems to go straight towards the competitive scene, the area that most people playing will say is the less interesting way to engage with the gaming side of their hobby.
I mean, I disagree. I think the competitive scene probably has the most people playing it. And the competitive scene also needs the most balance because you're playing at a high level. So if you're playing something at a high level, you have tournaments, you have, so many ways units are interacting with one another. You're going to need a lot of balance behind it, right? While if you're playing something like D&D, you're going to have rules, like how Dungeons & Dragons has rules, but it's a lot more open-ended in how you can play the game, because you have a guy, a dungeon master or whatever, like dictating what you can do and providing the rules, right? So, I don't know. It makes sense to me.
So why does it get all the attention? Now, it could be that matched play with the most updated competition rule sets is the easiest way to get a pickup game going between folks who don't know each other, and that's
very true, yes. I don't want to sit down with 5 people I don't know and play D&D. I played a D&D campaign on Twitch with my friends for a year and a little over a year, and as much as I love them, by the end of that, I was so worn out. We had to dedicate one day every week for like 3 to 4 hours, and getting those people to even show up, let alone like everybody to show up, was like insane. So do I want to go to a game store and be like, hey guys, who wants to play a 4-hour D&D campaign that I don't know? No, I don't want to do that. I just want to go there and be, does anyone want to anyone want to have me throw my rats against whatever army you got? Cool, let's do it. That's all I want. I want to play like a skirmish Total War battle in real life with the things that I built and painted. That's what I want.
true. Narrative games require more creativity and agreement between the two players on what the experience is that they're trying to create on the tabletop, and the result is almost by definition unbalanced. Competitive rule sets are much simpler, and the rules of engagement are predetermined before you even walk in the door. Now, I've played a few...
I mean, I don't know if they're simpler. I would say, I don't know. So, have you read the Warhammer Fantasy Rulebook? That thing, it took me like a week to read and break down. Like, so it depends what game you're playing, right? Because there's so many different games. I take it he's referring to like Warhammer 40k. So he mentions it later. But, I mean, there's so many different styles of games. There's skirmish games, there's big games, there's different point values of games. And in fact, there are narrative type games. There's Path of Glory, I believe 40k has like Crusade or something like Crusade. I don't know. I mainly know Sigmar has Path of Glory or Path to Glory, whatever it's called. They literally made like some D&D style games. So like, I don't know. It seems like they got something for everybody. I don't know.
Few tournaments of Warhammer 40k, I've played pickup games at shops, and I've had a pretty good time with them. But the most fun I've had playing Wargames is narrative games, where there's an emerging story playing out on the tabletop. This doesn't mean that narrative games can't be competitive either. You can play a narrative game.
That also doesn't mean that competitive games can't be narrative, right? So, for example, when I played a game of fantasy, or old world, whatever you want to call it, against my friend the other month, we had a scenario where I was playing Beastmen, he was playing Empire, humans, whatever, I hate humans. And then my Razor Gore charged his general failed his leadership check to see if he was afraid. He rolled like a 12. So his general fled, and his general fled into his wizard, who then fled off of the table. And so, like, obviously this is just like a terrible competitive situation, right? His general's flying away in fear. His wizard just left the table. But, like, to us, like, obviously he's like, oh, this sucks. But, like, it was such a funny, goofy moment because we were like, just imagine there's this general on the battlefield and he's like, oh my God, a single Razor Gore charging him. And it's just like, like charging it. And he's like, I gotta get out of here. And then he's like fleeing. And the wizard's like, holy shit, there must be some insane army coming. I gotta get out of here. And he flees. And it's all just because like of a pig. So like to us, that was like a funny narrative type of thing. Like we used our imagination and creativity to be like, dude, that was such a funny situation that occurred. You know, we weren't like, oh, statistically speaking, this was such an unfortunate series of events. Like, no, as long as you're playing with people that also enjoy that type of, you know, gameplay or however you're playing, they're not taking it serious, that's fine. I mean, I think a lot of this boils down to who you want to play with. If you want to play with people who want to play more narratively, which it sounds like he knows more narratively focused people, then that makes sense. But like, I'm more of a competitive person, but I'm not like I'm not going to take it full on serious. While there's some people that are like, I want to play this completely serious, competitive, like 100%, right? Kind of like MOBAs. There's people who play MOBAs competitively. There's people who play casual competitive. That's what I kind of did. I was like, I'm going to get the plat and then I'm good. There's people that just enjoy playing. They're like, I don't even care if I win or lose, right? There's a whole bunch of different styles. So, yeah.
With both players trying very hard to push their side to victory. But the victory itself tends to be less of the point. Let's step back a bit and set the context for this conversation. Wargames didn't used to be one player versus another player just battling it out. In what was essentially the original wargame Kriegspiel, there was an umpire that ran the game instead. They would set
So is a dungeon master, right? Like, I mean, this sounds like a tournament almost. Like, you need an umpire there? Like, I don't know. That sounds like more convoluted.
The conditions of the battle, the scenario, the troops and troop types. They would receive orders from the players on both sides in written messages and move the troops on the map according to those orders. They might even hold on to messages meant for allied players if the conditions of the battle might delay messages, or even give those messages to the enemy. The rules in the original...
I mean, this kind of sounds like a board game. Like, it genuinely sounds like a board game to me. So I'm like, I guess... like, this is supposed to be the boardification of war games. If anything, this sounds like the first ever war game was pretty much a board game. Like, I don't know. Technically, every war game is like a board game. You're playing on a big board, so I don't know.
Version of the game weren't fully worked out, so the umpire would make judgment calls to respond to more creative orders in unique ways.
I mean, that works out well in baseball, where we got an umpire who misses calls all the time. Works out great in competitive environments like baseball. Like, I don't know. It feels like it's just a DM. Like, he just wants a DM to like control the rules of the game, which doesn't really feel competitive. It just feels like I'm playing a role-playing game, which is fine if you're playing that, but like, I don't want to play that. I don't want to have an umpire. I don't want to be like, hey, Ricky, you want to play Warhammer? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, you're the umpire. And he's like, what? Yeah, watch the two of us play over here. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to play. It's like, too bad. We need an umpire. So it sounds like it's just more work to get into something that's already difficult to get into. Like, you need to know people. Now you need to know not only one other person, but now you need two people. And one of them has to be dedicated to being a person that just knows the rules or like dictates the rules of the game. Like, it just sounds like too much.
A more modern approach to war games is where the rules are very defined and there's an answer for any scenario that occurs. At least that's what the producers of those rules would like you to think.
I mean, it is, because there's so many rules that go into this game, because there's so many situations that occur from these moments of the game, right? Because every time you play a game, it's so open-ended, which, unlike a board game, where a board game is like, here's your pieces that come in the box, here's the thing that comes in the box, you play the game, yeehaw, right? That's like what it is for a bunch of skirmish games and stuff, but we're talking like a massive scale game with, there's tournament play, casual play, whatever, but there's like so many different armies, there's so many different war scrolls, there's so many different just interactions that can occur that you need some sort of base set of rules. And then obviously there's going to be interactions where it's just like, I don't know how this plays out, this doesn't make sense. And that's why they have FAQs and stuff, because there's so many rules to help keep things in line, but it's never going to be fully kept in line. Like, it's impossible to do it unless you do, I don't know. I can't even figure out how to do it.
In reality, using unique pieces of terrain, loads of different books and resources that are constantly changing and impossible to keep a mental archive of, and various models representing different eras of the game that are technically still legal, result in all sorts of rules fog of war that require players to come up with on-the-fly rulings that they...
I mean, I agree with them to an extent here. There is a bunch of shit that's hard to keep track of, especially when there's like physical books, digital books. There's like additions to the physical books. It's like, oh, you didn't buy the addendum to the addendum book? That's like the thing, instead of, I don't know, like just putting everything digitally would make it a lot easier. But I still do like having physical books. I think it's nice. But yeah, there is a ton of shit you have to keep track of, which is part of the annoying part of the game. But, you know, that's... that part is true. It is very annoying keeping track of all that.
Can agree to so that the game can just keep moving forward. This happens all the time in modern war games, and it's not really a big problem for most people, because most people just shrug off an unusual scenario just to keep the game going. But then why are we pretending like these war games are these super balanced competitive games that can or should be played in tournaments?
I mean, we're not. It's a competitive game, but it sure as hell ain't balanced. I'm not pretending. I mean, I played League of Legends. 1 week, Malphite was slamming into people like rock solid, and the next week he was garbage. But like, it's still played at a competitive tier, and it's an esport. It's got millions of dollars funded into it, but that game is unbalanced as shit. And that's kind of the point, is that no game is ever going to be perfectly balanced, right? And the point is that sometimes things are more balanced than others. Some factions, some armies are more balanced than others. You never know. Some might be balanced because they sell more, right? They might buff Space Marines more because they sell more, and people want to play the Space Marines. We got to fix that, right? It happens in League. It happens in all these games where everybody plays Yasuo. We got to keep Yasuo going. Oh, they banned Yasuo. We better make Yone because everybody wants to play Yasuo. We'll make Yone. But, Ziggs, he sucks. Throw him in the garbage. Nobody's playing him, so we'll fix him down the line. Right? It's kind of like that, except it's even taken to another level because you have to buy and build and paint this stuff. And so I think it adds another layer to it, because you're like, I just bought and painted all this shit, and now I have to play, and my army's unbalanced. So that can feel unfun. But at the same time, unless you're playing at such a high competitive tier of the game, it really shouldn't matter. If you're playing against like-minded, skilled people, if you're both gold players or silver players or bronze players, and you're like, oh, I can't play this army because they're bad, unless it's an insanely bad army you're probably still gonna be able to win. Like, that's why diamond tier Master League people can just take trash garbage champions and still beat a person that doesn't know what they're doing, because most of the time it's not the army that's bad or the champion that's bad or whatever, even though they are, but it's like they can use the mechanics of the game in their favor. They could be like, I know how to position myself to get my hard-hitting units into battle against what I want to kill. I can position myself to get battle tactics and objectives. I can position it so that I screen you out away from my stuff. I can, you have like so many different ways they can play around stuff. While somebody doesn't know what they're doing, might just be like, I charged my big guy into your guy. It died. Oh, this sucks. Right? Like, and that's part of like the learning experience. It's like MOBA, it's like war game, like no matter what it is, it's all about the learning experience behind that. Right? And so to me, it just, I don't know, it makes sense to me. Maybe it's because I come from a like League of Legends MOBA background and I'm just used to this and I enjoy the competitive, weirdly unbalanced stuff. But I mean, nobody's like, I haven't heard anybody be like, man, Warhammer sure is competitive and balanced. Like most of the time they're like, it's competitive, but it's not balanced at all. I'll tell you that much.
In my stupid opinion, this is the worst possible development for Wargames. Right now, Wargames are running on modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Rules, and I think that they should be running on Duelist Kingdom rules.
Oh, he plays a Yu-Gi-Oh! Clip here. I'm gonna skip that.
Should be able to come up with cool ideas to try on the fly and deploy them into games right on the spot.
That sounds completely unbalanced. That sounds unbalanced. I'm gonna... here's a rule I make. My Slan can cast Nuclear Explosion. You're dead. Like, okay, like how are we gonna balance? That sounds like this needs more rules to balance the open-ended rules. It's like because you're just starting to make rules for narrative fun, which I guess can be fun, but that's why then you need the umpire, the DM, and the DMs be like, that's crazy, you can't do that. And now you've just created this whole thing where you need a rule set, which is why it's so much easier to balance around the competitive army rule set, because you've laid out all these baseline rules in a foundation and you build up from the foundation so that, obviously if you're playing a game and a weird situation happens, you go, oh, let's look at the rules. And if the rules aren't, specific about it, you go like, just figure it out based on logistics. Like if I charge a Kroak and he's supposed to go this way because he's like a big Kroak that can go blah, 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 be like, yeah, sure, he could do that. Or just like roll a dice, like 1, 2, 3, he fails, 4, 5, 6, he's good. Like, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me. I don't know. But it seems like to me, the narrative stuff just seems even more complex.
There should be unexpected things that happen that screw up the plans of both players. There should be overarching campaigns that set the context for this battle.
There are. I mean, in competitive play, there are. I literally had a game not too long ago where I played Skaven, and I was like, dude, I'm going to blow this monster up, right? And I rolled my warp lightning cannon and I blew myself up, and I was like, well, that was unexpected. I mean, it was expected because I'm Skaven, but like that's the power of the dice. Like I rolled my dice and my shit blew up, and I'm like, well, now what do I do? I thought I was gonna kill something and now I killed myself. So like, what do I do? Like that happens in the game. It happens all the time in competitive games. People roll badly. People get out of position. People say, oh, I'm gonna get deep striked, I need to move away, and then they forget something else. Like, oh, I forgot I could get hit by this spell now, or this shooting attack, or this thing's gonna charge me. Like, that's the whole point of the strategy of the game, of the war game. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here.
Meaning that for one of the players, maybe victory just means slowing the opponent down. And
I mean, it can. It depends what you're trying to get out of the game. Like, when I play Nurgle, for example, of slowing things down, I had such a fun time just diseasing people. It's also like when if I play Magic and I'm playing like a blue-black deck and you just know you're annoying the opponent, sometimes that's fun, but I still want to win, right? Like the whole point of the game to me is still to win, but I can have fun without winning still, right? It doesn't have to go hand in hand, but I'm not like, man, I didn't win. I wish the game just had a story behind it. Like, I don't need that. That doesn't interest me.
The main thing that I think could improve Wargames is bringing back the referee. Role-playing games understand that having a game master
I heavily disagree.
who can make on-the-fly rulings on player-driven creative problem-solving that feel like they make sense in the world being played seriously elevate them. And they could seriously elevate Wargames from what they've been turning into over the years, which is board games. Wargames.
I mean, yeah, it's technically a board game, but so would a narrative style like D&D type game. Like it's still like a board game. I mean, the whole point of Warhammer to me, of like a competitive Warhammer or just war game style thing, is it's a massive scaled board game. Like it's a board game on a massive scale. You have so many different armies. You have so many different rules that it's hard to learn and hard to get into, but it's just a big board game, and some people like it, some people don't. I think that's it. Some people like it, some people don't. It's okay to not like it. It's okay to be like, you know what, I tried it, and I didn't really enjoy it. I don't know.
Games are at war with themselves, with their own identity. They don't want to be war games, they want to be board games. They want to have that refined and defined rule set that's easily replicated and defined. But the very nature of war games makes that simply an impossible thing for them to have. Most war games aren't on a grid.
I mean, that's pretty much any competitive game. Every competitive game is going to have a meta. It's going to have things that are unbalanced. That's just people are going to figure out the best way to do something and do that. That is what it is.
They use measuring tape to determine distances. That's messy. Yes, measuring tape.
It definitely is, yes.
It's accurate, but most people will use it for a minute and then kind of eyeball where they put their troops. They aren't meant.
I mean, if somebody's eyeballing their troops, I'm gonna be like, yo, can you measure that? Like, that sounds like an opponent problem. Like, most people when I play, they measure their shit. I get, if it's like, oh, I rolled a 5 on my charge and it's like clearly 3 inches away, it's like, whatever, I'll just push him in. But if it's like, oh, it's a 6-inch charge and I rolled a 5 and somebody's like, eyeball it, push it, I'd be like, no, move that back, you measure that. All right, like, that sounds like an opponent issue. It sounds like somebody's just cheating.
To be accurate to the centimeter with it.
And you don't have to be like perfectly accurate with it, but you got to be like pretty close, right?
Which means that it's not a perfectly defined and refined system. And it really was never meant to be that. RPGs
And I don't think it is, and that's fine. I mean, just because something's competitive doesn't mean it has to be perfect. Again, going back to baseball, we have umpires in baseball. That's a highly competitive, billion-dollar industry, and they've got dudes behind the plate being like, strike! And it's like, that was off the plate. Strike. It's like, that was off the plate too. Like, and that's in an insanely high profile competitive industry. Like, just because it's competitive doesn't mean it has to be insanely balanced to a T, right?
D&D spawned from war games because people wanted to expand on the narrative elements of their games. They wanted to bring the camera down and see the struggles of the individual. But when RPGs left wargaming, it feels like they took all the narrative juice with them. What's left in the world of wargames to me just feels like a pale imitation of the tight, refined mechanics of board games.
I mean, I don't agree really. I just it feels like it's wargaming. Like when I play my skinks, I'm like, hey, they're skinks. Like I think it depends what you're trying to get out of this. Like, are you trying to play this grand roleplay Dungeons and Dragons? I create a character that's a skink named like Ikpotek who goes on a journey to discover himself in the jungle, or am I just playing Total War where I'm like, here's my slaying, here's my shit, I'm gonna throw it at you, let's roll some dice, see what happens. Like, I think it just depends what you're trying to get out of it. And like, I'm not trying to learn my skink's backstory, I'm just trying to play some Warhammer.
With way too much time, effort, and money put into them. You can get a strategic experience that is 1,000 times more fulfilling playing War of the Rings 2nd Edition for $80 with you and your best friend than you can if you spend $400 building and buying a Warhammer army just to show up to your local game store, get table turn 1, let it sit in your closet for a year, and then sell it on Facebook Marketplace.
Now, there's a lot to unpack there, but number one, I mean, the War of the Ring, it's probably a good board game. I've never played it, but like, it's a board game. There's only a limited amount of choices, a limited amount of units. You have to like Lord of the Rings. I like Lord of the Rings, but I'd probably play that a couple times and be like, cool. But you can't compare the strategy of like an actual board game versus like a massive war game scale thing with so many different units, so many different lists, so many different models, so many different rules. Like, it's, and then to be like, oh, well, it's better because you don't spend as much money and you don't have to go to the game store and be like, I'd like to play a game, and then your first game ever, you get blasted off the table, which most of the time, whenever somebody's trying to play their first game ever, if you're at like a good game store and you have like normal people there, they're not going to go all out against you. They're going to play a lesser scaled game. They're going to try to teach you stuff. They're not going to be like, I've outpositioned you and activated my trap card. You die. Like, unless they're an ass, which, you know, most people I've met are just cool, normal people that are like, yeah, you know, we'll try to learn the game. And then you teach them the game, and then you can slowly implement other things into the game, which now with 4th edition Age of Sigmar, if you're going that way, is even easier because they've like segmented off different parts like the magic system, the battle tactics and all that, so you can like add those in later. Now it's just even easier. Plus they have like the spearhead and different ways to play it, so now it's even easier to get into and learn the basic mechanics. So like, I heavily disagree.
I'm not saying...
And on top of that, you get to build and paint your models, which is like a hobby in itself. You don't even have to play the game. Some people just build and paint the models, and then they just want to try playing the game to see how it is. I mean, that's what I did. I didn't intend to even play the game. I was like, maybe I'll play once or twice, and then I got hooked on it, and I'm still hooked on it. So, like, it's clearly a game for people like me, which, you know, again, not everybody's going to be like me, but I've met numerous other people like me. Like, that's my game group. We all kind of have the same play style. Some are better than others, but, like, you know, even one of my friends who's like really good at the game, he'll like try to play shitty armies and like tone himself down. And even when he plays those shitty armies, he still like beats us. So like, there's also something to be said for that, right? Like, again, like there's a skill level of being able to take a bad army and beat other people playing with like good armies. So, yes.
War games aren't fun. They're just not meant to be played in the way that companies making them seem to want you to play them. Or
I mean, they are meant to be played that way, because that's what they're intending for. I think it's just, this is the way he doesn't want to play them, which is fine. Again, like, this is fine. I'm not saying he's wrong in terms of like, well, he's kind of wrong in terms of like, this is not the way they're intended to be played, because like, what are we basing that off of? Like some game from like the war game based off history from whatever? Like, I don't think you can base it off that. That was just like one of the first things ever. I don't know.
Advertise that you should play them. So what would it look like to put a referee back into war games? Well, I think
probably
it works
like
best
D&D.
when you have a group all involved in a game. Let's say you have a group of 4 or 5 friends that are into Star Wars Legion. Cool. Pick out a cool planet to...
So already, we need 4 to 5 people. You know 4 to 5 people? No? Too bad. You can't play. Sounds great.
Fight over. Make a big map, divide it into regions, generate cool resources and cities and landmarks.
All right, world build an entire world. So literally, it's like D&D. Like, build an entire world. Sit down with your 4 to 5 friends and build an entire world for you to explore. All right.
Generate a table of conditions that could occur whenever armies meet at those locations. Generate a table for world events that could happen on certain turns of the game. Generate a bunch of factions that exist that you could earn the approval and ire of.
More world
Then
building.
give all of that to a referee and let them use those.
And then give it to a DM and let him do research this shit for like a week.
Resources to create unique scenarios for each of you to deal with.
And then make a D&D campaign, okay? So that essentially boils down to like play D&D with your miniatures, is what I'm hearing here.
Maybe 2 players meet at an oil refinery owned by an off-world trading company. Now, one player secretly offers to pay the off-world trading company for the oil, while the other player plans to just take it by force. The off-world trading company takes the deal and sends in mercenaries to help the player that they made a deal with. Now, that other player is going to get bodied by the combined force. Sure, that fight itself was unfair, but the point is...
Let's just... that sounds just as bad as like I brought my models to the thing and got wiped off the table. It's like, all right, now I'm going to try this. And it's like, all right, I've diplomacied with the mercenaries to shit on you. You're dead, idiot. Like, okay, cool. I want to keep playing. Especially after we built this entire world and now I'm just dead right away. Like, that seems even worse to me. And plus, this seems like it just takes longer. Like, this probably takes like 4 or 5 hours to play one of these games. I don't want to sit there for 4 or 5 hours playing D&D, like, and doing all this stuff with like random people I don't even know. It's just like, I just want to go meet up with one person and throw some shit at each other for like 2 hours max and then be like, cool, see you later.
Isn't about making each fight fair. It's about making the whole game unique, fun, and interesting.
Wait, so it's not about making it fair, it's about making it unique, fun, and interesting. But like, to me, that doesn't sound unique, fun, or interesting. It just sounds like we're just playing D&D and I just got screwed over and I'm like, well, this sucks. And now I'm just going to sit there like being like, what do I do now? I guess I go home. Instead of like, I don't know, to me, like, Warhammer is interesting and fun because there's so many different things that can happen. You know, you play a different objective, a battle plan, and there's different ways that you can interact with the terrain. You play against different people, right? You don't play against the same army every time unless you're playing the same person every time. You know, one game you play orcs you play against orcs. One game you play against Seraphon. One game you play against slaves to darkness. One game you play against Nurgle, right? And then maybe you're trying different armies. There's different mix and match ways these go about, and it plays out in different fun, unique ways. In one game, your warp lightning cannon blows itself up. The next game, it kills a monster, right? That, to me, that's unique and fun and interesting. Right? I don't know.
You know for a fact that the player that got beaten in that last fight will now be thinking really hard about how to get that kind of advantage next time.
No, they won't. This is the exact same scenario as what we just talked about. Of how is this different from the guy bringing his models to a game store and getting wiped off the table and being like, well, time to put him in my closet, never play again. Like, if this happened to me in a D&D thing and I was like, the oil rigs, whatever, I don't even remember the scenario, I would just be like, okay, cool. I'd take my shit, throw it in the closet, never play again. I would have the reverse scenario. But like in the competitive aspect, I'd be like, hey, you know what? This guy obviously is better than me. He knows strategies. He knows armies. Maybe I just need to learn more armies. Maybe I need to know my army better. Maybe I need to get better at list building, right? Like, to me, there's a lot more ways to get better in the competitive aspect of the game instead of like, I got to figure out diplomacy of the world we're in and like figuring out what the DM is trying to, like, what? This seems like so much more complicated.
That's the kind of gaming that really excites me, gets my imagination running.
And that's cool, but it doesn't for me.
It's the kind of wargaming that I'm most interested in going forward. Now, I still think that there's a place in the world for matched play. It really is great for one-off pickup games, especially with people you don't know. But
yes,
I think that this sort of play should be seen by the community as a nice beer and pretzels way to play the game, and certainly not the main way to play. Or,
I mean, I say it's the exact opposite. Like, the most, like, if I'm gonna sit down and play a 5-hour D&D campaign, I better have some beer and pretzels, or I'm gonna lose my mind, right? But like a 1v1 at a store against like a random army, we're just throwing shit, battling it out, like, cool, I'm good. It's if you know the rules, you fight against somebody else, you say, hey, what does your unit do? I don't know what that does. And they go, oh, it does this. And you go, okay, cool. And then after a couple, like an hour or two, you're done. And that's that. Like, that sounds much easier. And that explains to me why everything is the way it is, right? Because I think Games Workshop and all these companies have realized, like, hey, it's better to have shorter games, because like if you made a 5-hour D&D campaign your main focus, like, you're gonna lose so many people. It's gonna be so much harder to get new people in. It's like, well, I don't have 4 or 5 friends. What do? I don't have a friend that wants to be a DM umpire. Well, like, I guess you're out of luck. Go play something else. Like, right?
Or something anybody should be obsessing over. My main argument here is that we as a community should be putting way more collective time and energy into ways to play the game that we all agree are more fun, and way less into metas and tournaments.
Yeah, but some people find metas and tournaments fun, right? Like, I think competitive games are fun. It's just, again, this all comes down to like preference.
Thanks so much.
But to me, so that was it. And I mean, to me, the whole point is that I don't mind him saying all this stuff, right? Like, it's fine, it's his opinion, whatever, but he says it so like matter-of-factly, like, this is the way it should be. This is the thing. This is not fun. This is fun. And I'm like, no, I disagree completely. So I just had to respond to that because I watched that and I just, as you can tell, I disagreed with a lot of it as somebody who plays a ton of Warhammer. So let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Your opinions, thoughts, all that good stuff. And I'll see you next time. Okay? Okay. See ya.